Welcome to the very first episode of Type 1 Times, where your host, Luke Westrick, which is me, covers everything you need to know and wanted to know about Type 1 diabetes. This podcast was created to give you insight on what life is like living with this disease. I myself have been diagnosed for over 5 years now, and I'll be approaching my 6th this coming October. I have interviewed several other type 1 diabetics for this project specifically to get their perspectives on how they approach everyday life. Sadly, I do not have the audio recordings of them available, but I knew it would be a great idea to hear from others dealing with the same battles and how they approach them. But before I share all of their valuable insight with you guys, first, what even is type 1 diabetes and how does it work? Type 1 diabetes, or T1D for short, is an autoimmune disease that occurs when the body's immune system attacks insulin-producing cells, which are located in the pancreas, and completely stops producing insulin. An autoimmune disease is any kind of disease where your immune system mistakenly attacks your body. To this day, it is still not clear as to what causes this for diabetics. For instance, I randomly got sick in the span of about a month when I was being diagnosed, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. Continuing on, the purpose of insulin is to convert glucose into energy after you consume food or drinks or both, according to the article Understanding Insulin, What You Need to Know by Carmen Fuchs. Being a diabetic, our bodies can no longer produce this drug naturally, so we have to take it artificially. We can do this by either using syringes, or you can choose a specific type of insulin pump that will deliver it to your body with the press of the button. Another device that many diabetics use is called a continuous glucose monitor. This is a device that you can put on your body just like a pump that reads what your blood levels are. You can pair the device with your phone so you can check your numbers there instead of having to use blood tests every time. The reason why this is so important is because you always have to watch your blood glucose levels. So using this method makes it 100 times easier. This is vital to keep track of because when you consume food or drinks, you need to know what your level is so you know how much insulin to dose. If you are wrong with your numbers, say for example, my blood level is 70, which is low, and I just gave myself 10 units of insulin for a single bag of chips, that is extremely dangerous because with the level I am at and the amount of insulin I dosed, I will quickly need to consume more, otherwise I will pass out shortly and could even potentially die if I let it go on for long enough. For the first interview, I decided to interview one of my mom's longtime coworkers and friends, Daryl Gerber. One question I asked him was, what is the single hardest part about being a diabetic? And he responded saying, the constant thought about not having your blood sugars crash when you are in important meetings that are difficult to leave, or going for a hike or being outdoors, and always having to be sure to keep your blood sugars up. I just want to be able to go backpacking in the wilderness and not have to worry about my blood sugars. That was his response. I relate to this on an extremely personal level. If I gave you $1 for every time I go outside and do something fun and active like playing basketball and having to stop and rest for 20 minutes because my levels are too low to safely play, you'd be right next to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos with more money than you know what to do with. It is really annoying when this happens, but the worst part is how frequently it does, which a lot of people fail to realize. Even sometimes, I myself don't realize how often I have to tend to this matter. The second interviewee for Type 1 Times is one of my old friends, Tyler Cruisley. For context, he is 1 year younger than me, and he's been diagnosed a lot longer than I have. He and I have a lot of similarities, so I knew he would have to be on the podcast. Before I asked Tyler the question, has a social norm ever made you feel uncomfortable as a diabetic? And if so, why? I thought about what he was going to say before I asked him. I predicted that he would say that he doesn't mind the social norms too much, but that he finds all of the people staring at him and asking him random questions to be irritating. I predicted this because this was actually my opinion, and he and I are pretty similar people, so I thought it would match. He actually responded to my question saying, "Personally, I have never liked people knowing I've had diabetes, so only people I am closer with know. I used to do everything. I could not take insulin in class. There are two main reasons for this. The first is I don't like people feeling bad for me. The second is I didn't like having people ask what I was doing. Like when I was in class, I would pull out my pump and I would get asked, why do you have two phones? What is that? Tons of different questions. But now I've grown up a bit and I've realized that having diabetes is just a part of me and there's nothing wrong with that. It is who I am." As you can see, I was somewhat right about what he was going to say. I thought a lot about his last sentence, which actually made me really proud of him. A lot of people are very hesitant to accept that they have a disease with no cure currently, but Tyler has realized that no matter what, it can't be taken away from him and that he has to accept it, which he did obviously. I hope that his response can inspire fellow type 1 diabetics out there to be able to accept yourself for who you are and that a good mentality with it goes a very long way. The last interview I conducted with my friend Sierra Sanderson. With this interview, I decided to focus on the mental aspect of living with T1D. I wanted to see what she would say about self-discipline as a diabetic and how draining and mentally exhausting it can be. The question I asked her was, is it difficult to stay disciplined with taking care of yourself and watching your blood sugar levels, or are you on top of your game? For her response, she said that it definitely depends on 1, how my mental health is, and 2, what tools I have. If I'm on injections, which are syringes, and finger pricks, it is really hard to keep up with my diabetes. When I have an insulin pump and a CGM, diabetes is much, much easier, and it's way less frustrating and demoralizing to try to take care of. I have bad days, good days, terrible A1Cs, and great ones. It depends on so many different factors, and some phases of life are much harder than others. The reason why I think her response is great for the mental health aspect is because as a diabetic, when your blood levels are really good versus when they are not good at all, people tend to be much happier. One reason is because you feel better in general when your blood levels are right, and you can feel like you never want to leave your bed again when they're really bad. Another reason this makes people happier is because they don't feel as stressed. They don't have the thought in the back of their head saying, you need to fix your levels. But if you have really bad blood glucose, then that thought is in the back of your mind saying you need to fix it. Today, on the first episode of Type 1 Times, we explored everything related to type 1 diabetes. We took a look at what even type 1 diabetes is in the first place. We took a look on how everything works, from what an autoimmune disease is, to how someone actually gets the disease, to what insulin is, where it's produced, what it's used for, to different ways you can use it. We discussed that you can use either a normal syringe or an insulin pump and how a continuous glucose monitor works and why they are very important to successfully managing your diabetes. But most importantly, we took an up-close look to learn about what actually living with T1D is like. What I hope everyone takes away from this first episode on the podcast is how difficult it can be to live with and manage this incurable disease each day. I don't want this for pity or anything like that. I want this to inform people for their knowledge, or if they have a friend or family member with the disease, they can help them out if needed. Whether it's learning from Daryl that it is extremely tough to be able to do all of your fun outdoor activities without having any interruptions to fix blood glucose, whether it was learning from Tyler that it's important to always accept who you are no matter your flaws, or whether it was learning from Sierra about how important the mental health aspect is with being a type 1 diabetic, I hope you're able to take away what it was like to be a diabetic from this podcast. Until next time, this has been Type 1 Times. Thanks for listening.